Hi, everybody. I enjoyed reading your discussion posts this weekend about Mark and John. I think you made some great points about their gospels and how they're similar and different. And as many of you pointed out, it makes a lot of sense that they would be both similar and different. Similar because they're talking about the same people. Obviously, by their gospel accounts, we can tell that Jesus was countercultural, where he spoke to women, which would have been kind of unheard of at the time for a man who would speak publicly to someone who wasn't their wife. And the fact that they're mentioned by name and their stories kind of went down in history because of the gospel writers is significant too, because most of the women at the time wouldn't have been even mentioned. Even if they weren't mentioned by name, it's still significant that their story was talked about, and also that Jesus would have interacted with them and took the time to heal them and to catechize them and to treat them with dignity and respect. And of course, Mark's gospel, because it was the first one written, and John's gospel, because it was the last one written, are different because there's a much more developed theology by the time John's gospel is written. Also, when John wrote, he intentionally wrote quite a different account because there were already 3 other accounts and he was familiar with all 3. And just like you and I, if we were going to write a 4th account of the same story, we would only do that if we had a lot to add to that story, which John's gospel does. So this coming week, you're going to read about the gospel according to Luke. And this is my favorite gospel. And it's really the Luke Acts work, because we think that the Acts of the Apostles is kind of the sequel to the Gospel according to Luke. We have figured that out, or know that, because both are addressed to the same person. And the Gospel of Luke basically starts off saying, in my first account, I will tell you about Jesus. And then Acts of the Apostles says, in my second account, I will tell you about the apostles. And they're both also addressed to someone named Theophilus. And this might be a specific person, someone whose real name was Theophilus. It could be someone whose pseudonym was Theophilus, trying to protect their identity. Or it could just mean, hey, all you God lovers, because in translation, Theophilus means God lover. Either way, we know that the 2 were written by the same person. And so this is kind of like Star Wars and the Return of the Jedi, if you will, or Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone and Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Both written by the same person, one right after the other. And it is kind of interesting because even though they were written by the same person, they're 2 different genres. So the Gospel of Luke obviously is a gospel, and the Acts of the Apostles is more of a historical book. And again, together they kind of give us a complete story, and I love this gospel and this collection for that reason. Another reason I love the gospel according to Luke is because there's a great emphasis on the lower class people, and Jesus is portrayed as being very compassionate. And among these lower class people are women. And so it really does highlight a lot of stories of women, some unique stories. And some people have gone as far as to call the Gospel of Luke the Gospel of Women. And at the beginning of the chapter, you'll read, as Thurston kind of explains, that even though this is true, people have really debated, was Luke pro-woman or was he anti-woman? And there's kind of arguments for both sides that will be laid out in the chapter. And as I said, you'll read about some people that you haven't read about so far. Luke's gospel is one of the 2 gospels that gives us an infancy narrative, which is like the story of the birth of Jesus. And Luke's gospel highlights Mary and Elizabeth and a woman named Anna, and we don't read about them or this part of their story anywhere else. And so that gives us a good corpus to go by as far as important stories about women. And so when you get to Acts of the Apostles, you will read about some other women that probably took on some leadership roles in the early church. And there's one woman who is talked about kind of negatively in Acts of the Apostles, and her story is sort of unique. So as you read, those stories will be highlighted for you, like the last couple times, and you'll hear a little bit about different theologians' take on each story. This week you'll participate in another discussion and you take a quiz again. I will extend the time that you can take the quiz to midnight again, just to accommodate people's schedules. Hopefully you found that the PowerPoints are helpful, that by taking notes with the PowerPoints that you can be a little bit more successful on the quizzes. But one thing I think would be useful is if you pay attention to the heading of the question, because that is usually an attempt on my part to try to narrow it down for you where you could find this information in the reading. So study a little bit first before you start. Of course, once the clock starts, then it's a little bit harder to quickly find answers to things. Also want to remind you about the paper that's due on October 7th. This is due by 11:55 a.m. It's a research paper, 4 to 6 pages. You need to use 4 outside sources. The 4 to 6 page length does not include a cover page. You do not need a cover page. You do need to cite your sources as you use them, and you need to have an intro, a body, and a conclusion. An intro should start off broad and narrow down to your topic. It should also kind of highlight your main points for me. I should never in the first sentence of your paper know what your topic is, but by the end of the first paragraph, it should be very clear. Also, you should not use any personal pronouns because this is a formal paper. You need some sort of works cited page, and you should cite the sources as you use them. If you do have any questions, please let me know. I hope you have a great week. It looks like it's going to be a little rainy this week, so try to stay dry. Talk to you guys next week.